sourdough bread, scalloped potatoes, caramelized carrots and onions, garlic Parmesan Brussels sprouts, and then we're gonna make a pear crisp pie. So let's start by getting our sourdough out and baking because we've got to kind of utilize our oven. I was catching on there, so we can have the temperatures going for the chicken and whatnot. So let's get our sourdough out. That way we can start baking it at 500 for 20 minutes and then down to 450. Well, let me give a little mix around here. And then we're going to give it a quick score. We'll pop it in our Dutch oven and get that going. Again, I always kind of just dump a lot of flour in my basket. So I'm just going to scrape off a little bit here. That way I can rub it around nicely. And then our design can pop. Okay, let's just do our classic kind of crisscross score here. And then we'll do the little wheat leaf down. Although I kind of did more like a Christmas tree than a wheat leaf. It's an inverted wheat leaf. And there we go. That one was all over the place. But as long as the bread tastes good, that's all that matters. I know I remember one time my mom was like, "Oh, how do you get the designs in there?" And I'm like, "You just kind of cut it and do it there." And it's like, it just pops. And then let's give this a little bit more. Sometimes when you make your designs and you're like, "Oh, this is gonna be so awesome." It turns out awesome. Pop this in here. On there, we're going to put our lid on, and now my Dutch oven is nice and hot and preheated. I like it to do it in a nice hot oven. It lets it steam up fast, gives you that good little crust on it. We're going to pop this in 500 for 20 minutes, then we'll take the lid off and do 450 for 20 minutes. Got my oven set a little bit differently because we're going to put our giant roaster in here, and it needs a lot of room. But we'll have that in hopefully in the second part because my roast chicken only needs about an hour and a half to kind of cook all the way through for it. So hoping to have all of this done in 2 hours. Got a lot, big feast here, but it's kind of like our Sunday dinners. Okay, we've got in here 2 raw whole chickens. It's kind of the double pack from Costco with all the juices going down. We are going to make a little herby base that we're going to rub under the skin. Then we're going to rub some oil and spices and put it on top. So let's get our herbs kind of minced up to go in there. I picked a bunch of herbs from my garden. I've got rosemary, basil, purple basil, oregano, thyme. So just kind of a good collection of it. And we're going to use 1 onion in this as well. And then some butter, some lemon juice. I'm losing an onion wrapper. But all this stuff, this is going to kind of season it really nice and lovely. We're actually going to stuff the onions inside the chicken, which will give it a nice aromatic flavor with a lemon as well. Grab that little wrapper here on there. Now, I don't compost my onion tops, but I'm going to bring this over here so I can remember, just because your onion tops can really sprout and then they would actually like grow well in your composter, so I don't want that. I'm going to use 1 little lemon over here. And then let me grab, we can start mincing this up and then we can get our butter for it. So let's get all of our herbs prepped up. So I'm going to use 1 green onion. And this is what we're going to stuff underneath the chicken skin, in the sense that we'll separate kind of the skin from the chicken breast or the chicken. And then we'll rub this really herby butter underneath it. And then on top of the chicken, we'll do a little bit of oil with some dry spices. That way you can get the crispy skin on top, but then really flavorful chicken underneath. So we'll get these all minced up nicely. And then we're just going to put them in a bowl with some room temperature butter. We're going to throw in some garlic here in just a second as well. This is what makes the chicken so, so good. Okay, let's get, again, since we're going to kind of be shoving this under the skin, we want to have all of our herbs minced up. So don't leave any of the little twiggies or anything.
Have you thought about growing onions or green onions in
I have thought about starting some, green onions up because you can grow them in the fall here. In the summer, spring, we typically have just naturally like wild green onions that grow everywhere. My kids love to call them onion grass, and so when those little pop up, we'll use those. Um, but I know I was like thinking about, it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should try it. I think is I use so many onions in a week that I would grow them, and they're not one that I feel like would make a difference because I probably go through maybe 10 to 15 onions a week. So I don't have that much space to grow. I was thinking about doing sweet potatoes because I don't go through as many sweet potatoes. And so I was like, oh, that would be good. I like to kind of grow some of those harvest things that I don't quite use as much of. Because potatoes and onions, those are things I use a lot of. I do have a lot of herbs, which I really love, having fresh herbs in food, and spices are expensive. So it's kind of one of those nice things to always have a bunch of herbs in my garden. I was like, they have this little like hydroponic garden, and I used to have like a little arrow garden before, but they make these really big ones. And I was like, oh, I really want one of those, except they're expensive. But I was like sitting here and I was like, oh, maybe I can convince my parents to give me one for Christmas. We'll see. Um, it's where you don't have to do anything. You just put like the water in it and it does all the work, which is really wonderful for me. And then I could have like a bunch of indoor herbs and lettuces, things that, we don't use quite as much bulk on. Here we go. And let's get this. I'm getting my thyme off. I've already got my oregano, rosemary. Again, just getting off these little, kind of leaves. I'm going to save a couple sprigs of thyme here to go with our carrots because we're going to do a caramelized carrots and onions, and thyme works really well with that. And then, of course, I've got a bunch of not bay leaves, basil, purple and regular. You get those. Now we can give a quick little mince up here, just to chop it up because we want it kind of fairly fine so that it can really flavor all of our chicken. And then what we'll do is after we're done eating tonight, I'm going to, shred off all of the remaining meat, and then we'll make a lovely stock with the leftover because I like to do 2 roast chickens at a time because that gives me a little bit of extra chicken to use for another meal or 2 during the week, depending on how much we eat. And then, of course, the stock, which I love. And last time we went through our stock so quickly that it was like, God, we need to use it, especially because in my mind, I've switched over to fall. I know it's not. Although I was saying when we were driving back from our soccer game, which was in like 90-degree heat, I was like, it's starting to look like fall out there. I was like, look, that tree, all the leaves are brown on it and they're falling. I really think all the leaves are brown on that tree because it was scorched from the heat more so. But, in my mind, close enough. Okay, let me go get a bowl for these because we've got them kind of nice and minced up. And then we got to get our garlic minced up as well. And essentially, we're going to make this lovely herby butter that will rub under. And it will give you almost like a green speckled chicken, but it will be so flavorful. Okay, let's grab some garlic here. A good amount of garlic because garlic makes it all taste better. And we'll mince this up, and this will be, again, for both of the chickens. Now, I also rub my herby butter inside the cavity of the chicken, so I get that flavorful as well. But what we'll do is we'll actually place our onions and our lemon peel after we've kind of, mixed our juice in, and that's going to go into the cavity of the chicken, which gives it a nice little aromatic steaming base, which keeps the chicken nice and moist and delicious. And all of these will make really great flavor, like these herbs and everything make the stock taste amazing too. So let's get this minced up. This is, again, a lot of garlic here, but, I've got 3 pounds of garlic. I can use extra. It's not like I have to. Sometimes I'm like, okay, gotta make these 2 packs, typically about 1 pound of garlic, go through the week. Now I'm like, ooh, I'm swimming in garlic. Might have to do like a roasted garlic spread. Ooh, a roasted garlic sourdough this week. I might do that. I'll have to roast it up, make it a little bit. That'll be yummy for it. Ah, you know what would be really good? A roasted garlic cauliflower soup. I feel like that would be yummy. I know, my husband's like, cauliflower. I have a head of cauliflower in my fridge. I might make that tomorrow. We'll see. It'll be so yummy. See, I need to learn to appreciate the vegetables more. My grandfather, so my muffa growing up, used to talk about how, he grew up in Sweden, and when he was like a young boy, that one of his favorite times of years was when spring would finally come and they would have lettuces. And because he was so used to eating pickled, like, or jarred foods or just potatoes and root vegetables, that when they finally had spring lettuces and spring greens, that was his favorite thing. He loved the salad and how much of a treat it was.
Okay, so that's it.
Well, thank you, Kesha. We appreciate that.
And where do you find that cutting board?
This cutting board is from Target, good old Target. I saw it there. It was a nice big giant one, which I really, really like. Now, I typically like to do my cutting boards in darker colors because the white can stain a little bit more, but this one's been pretty good. Every now and then I'll like sanitize it, but it's held up so far pretty nice. And I love the little like drip edge for it. Okay, we've got our garlic in there. I'm going to cut my lemon in half. We're going to squeeze our lemon juice in here for this. And then we're going to save these to put inside our chickens. Get that lemon seed out. Let me get my onion. These are going to go inside the chicken as well. Just and adds the flavor, and then I scoop it out and it goes into our stock when we go to make our stock here. And then let's grab, we want to use some room temperature butter, so I've set some butter out for this. You're just going to use one stick, which means it's kind of like a half stick per chicken, but it works well. So we'll add this in here. And then before we get all of it mixed in there, I'm going to add some dry spices, pepper, garlic, salt for that. A little bit of Worcestershire, which will help break down the natural juices in the chicken, about a tablespoon. And then let's get some black pepper, around a teaspoon or so, because we are going to put some more on top of the chicken. Garlic salt, you're going to want like a tablespoon. You're going to want more of it because this is what's going to flavor all of it. So we'll do a good amount here. And then I'm just going to throw in a little bit of Mrs. Dash's original in here just to have a little bit of extra. And then we're going to go in and we are going to kind of mash it up and put it here. But I'm going to move all this because my hands are about to get all chickeny. I'm going to slide these on here because I want to use my cutting board later and I don't want to touch it with it. That one I have to wash it again. Okay, we're going to go through, we're going to mix this up and essentially create a nice, beautiful herby paste. Just use your hands because you're just about to go into your chicken anyways. And so you're essentially just going to make an herby butter here, which would be delicious on its own, but even better in the chicken. In room temperature butter, because your cold butter won't incorporate right this. And you want it because you want to be able to spread it. You need to be able to work with it here. Okay. So got my hands. They're still butter and herbified. No worries. We're going to go into our first chicken cavity. I'm going to take what's on my hands and I'm going to rub it inside my chicken cavity here. Then I'm going to take one of my lemons, half of my lemon, and 2 halves of my onions. And I'm just going to shove this inside. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit more of this herby butter. Rub it around inside your cavity of your chicken. Place your lemon and your other 2 halves. And then I always, because I do them in my big oval or round roaster here, I have them face the opposite direction so that the backs can settle well.
What's the difference between shallot and an onion?
So shallots are purple, much smaller, more sweet. Shallots are wonderful. And you can do it. They're much more expensive, so you can definitely use them. I would like to say shallots are kind of like a red onion that can handle the heat. Red onions can't handle the heat, but they're a sweeter onion, less pungent. Shallots are very much like that. They have a higher sugar content. Very lovely, but very small for it. So we're going in here for first. See how my hands are underneath the skin here. That's what you want to do. You just want to separate that top skin. Try not to break it, but just separate it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take half of your little butter mixture for this one. This is not quite half, but I'm going to do it in stages. You're going to rub it underneath here, underneath the chicken thing, and you're just going to spread it all the way around. That way when it bakes, it cooks directly into the chicken. And then don't forget to do it on the chicken legs and thighs here too. So you just slide it under here. And this is one where you just have to get your hands in nice and dirty. Then what we'll do is we will spritz the outside of our chicken with a little bit of olive oil, and then coat it with some dry spices. So you have that dry spices on the outside. Okay, we've got about one here. It is a messy process, but this will give you the most delicious, tender, roasted chicken here. I'm going to rotate this around here and get my hands here. And again, start by sticking like one finger underneath it, because you see I'm between the chicken and the skin. The middle strip, it holds together, but you have to kind of break it. So just break that little film, but be careful because your skin can tear. It's okay if it does tear. It just means it will kind of split more when it breaks.
Do you ever make Cornish game hens?
Yes, I do. I actually love Cornish game hens. My kids all call them like little chickens, like they're individual chickens when I make them. Um, and growing up, my stepdad used to always make Cornish game hens with green butter on my mom's birthday. It was one of her favorite meals. Um, and then I slowly started to take over them. But yes, I do love a perfect little Cornish game hens. When I make them, I'll make everyone a little hen themselves. The kids really, really like it. They think it's so special because they're like, I got my own little chicken for it. And they're so delicious for it. Here we go. A lot of times, if you just wait, because most of the time your Cornish game hens, they're in the freezer section at your grocery store. They go on sale every now and then you can get them for a really great price. And that's what I love. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, whole chickens, I can't do that. This is hard, or I don't know how to do it. Whole chickens are a really great way to have budget friendly meals. These two chickens together cost me $11. And this is going to get 2 meals out of just the chicken because we always have extra. We're going to also get stock out of it, which we'll use on a lot of different meals.
How many pounds are the chickens, and what size pot is that?
So this, they were on here. They were saying they were like 99 cents a pound. So I'm assuming I've got a 6 pounder and a 5 pounder right here with the chickens, although they look much bigger for it, but that's just how much the price tag was on it. They are quite hardy chickens here. I always like to go for the biggest ones. Costco tends to have really good prices on their double packs of chicken. So I always like to have those get them there. But most places like Publix, Kroger's, you can get them for a really good price. And you can, cook them up, make stock. You can boil them, shred them, get a lot of great stuff out of there. I'm going to get my hands all de-butterfied here. This recipe is in my cookbook. So I have the whole directions on how to make this roast chicken because a lot of people don't know about stuffing the herby butter underneath the skin. And there's also a little video of me doing it in the cookbook. Like it has it next, like a little QR code you can scan because again, it's something that's different but easy. And it's a really affordable meal that you can make that looks elevated and high end. Now I've got to grab my olive oil. We're going to make our olive oil here. We're going to just brush some over the top, or you can spritz it. I don't have my spritzer filled up. I got to fill it up here. So we'll just brush it with some olive oil, and then we'll sprinkle our dry herbs on it. Olive oil or any oil gives you crispy skin. Butter on the top, the milk solids will burn. Butter underneath the skin, it stays well hydrated. So those will cook into your chicken and make them delicious here. I'm going to put just about a tablespoon so I don't have to pour any more. And we just want to kind of coat the outside of our chicken with the oil. This again protects the skin, makes it nice and crispy. And then we'll put some dry herbs on it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put about a cup or so of water with a scoop of chicken bouillon in here, because I like to add a little bit of moisture in here, because we do part of the chicken with the lid off and part of the chicken with the lid on. And that helps us get a crispy skin without overcooking it. So just going to rub it around for it here. And oh, I think somebody was asking about the Dutch oven. This is my really big Dutch oven pot. I believe it's what, 13 and a half liters or something like that. It's a really, really big pot. It's the biggest one that Le Creuset makes on there. I got it one year at a going out of business sale for the Le Creuset store. So I got it for like 25% of the cost. Actually, I think it was even less than that. We're going to sprinkle a light little coating of black pepper over the top. Little bit of garlic salt. I also find that dry herbs do better on the outside versus the inside, because the dry herbs, because they're fresh and they have the water content, can burn them. A little bit of garlic salt on the outside, because again, you want to have that crispy skin on the outside, which is well seasoned. And we're going to do some Mrs. Dash's original, just a basic one. But sometimes I do herbs of Provence. Sometimes I do the table blend. Just, on there. If you do paprika or onion powder, those are going to give you more of a darker blackened color to it. They have great flavors, but again, they have a slightly darker color. I'm going to grab about, I'm going to put in here, I kind of see where my water level goes on there. So it's between 1 to 2 cups of chicken broth. I will do water with a scoop of chicken bouillon. You just like to have about a 1-inch puddle, but you can see the water goes up on one side, so I'll pour a little on there. I try not to pour it on the chicken. It will slowly settle underneath it. But this gives it, when it cooks, a nice steamy hot bath, which, because when we put the lid on, we'll trap that moisture in and make it delicious. Let's grab some of our chicken bouillon here, and we'll put a scoop in. And then, which is actually perfect timing, because we're about to take the lid off of our bread and bring our temperature down. I start this and I do the chicken at about 30 minutes or so at 450. Then I put the lid on, and then it can kind of cook at whatever temperature afterwards. So whatever I need it for anything else, I have it go in there. I will just get another spoon when I need some chicken stock later. You don't need to mix it all up. The heat will allow it to go in there. But we start the chicken off with the lid off to get a little bit of the crispy edging of the skin. Then we'll put the lid on in a little bit to put the moisture on. So I'm going to bring this over here so I have it with me to pop in the oven with our sourdough on there. And let me grab, my trivets are right there, so I'll grab those in 1 second. But let me grab these out here. I've got quite the display for all the things I need for it.
And do you use better than bouillon?
Yes, I love that one because it adds a lot of great flavor, and I can adjust the liquid versus using straight up broth, which tends, I find, are pretty flavorless unless you make it yourself. Okay, we've got our things on here, our nice beautiful pot here. I'm going to bring my oven down to 450 for this. We'll pop this back in here, let it kind of rise, do the finish bake. The first 20 minutes at 500 gives you that like chewy skin that sourdough has. Let me get my temperature here. 450. I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And now let's get this big guy in here on it. Every time I open up the oven, it's going to help it bring it back down to 450 from 500. And I've got quite the things. Make sure when you adjust your oven that you've adjusted it, because I'll put the lid on, but I have to bring my racks down because my pot does not fit on there on the higher setting with the lid on. So make sure you pre-plan that, because you don't want to have to do that when your oven's really, really hot. Okay, we've got those in there. I've got my timer set. Let's get our potatoes going, because we're going to do a lovely scalloped potatoes, but scalloped potatoes can take a long time to bake up to get nice and tender. I'm going to wipe this down real quick, and then we can get all of that stuff going here. And then we'll make our pie crust so that it can chill for a little bit while we get our pears going. And then we can start on the rest of our main course of our meal here on it. With the scalloped potatoes, I'm fine with having some herbs on my things because they'll make the potatoes feel really taste delicious still. Okay, let me get this guy over here. He's a little Dutch oven one. Sometimes I do my scalloped potatoes in a pie dish, but I was like, I'm gonna do this guy. He'll fit nicely and stay warm too. With scalloped potatoes, we want to give our potatoes a quick peel, and then we will slice them up nice and thin. Thicker potatoes take much longer to cook, so you don't want them too thick. And then I will start by peeling 3 potatoes. And then as I put them in there, sometimes I decide to do a 4th. It really just, these are really big potatoes.
What brand is your casserole dish?
So this is actually from, Joanna Gaines is Hearth and Hand. I was blanking on it for a second. It came out, and I haven't seen very many cast iron casserole dishes. And it was a really good price. I think I got it for like $29.99, which her stuff is pretty affordable. And so far, I've actually been really like, I think it's pretty good quality on there. You know, you never know sometimes with those like little brand things how good they are. This one's actually all for stuff that I've used has worked out really well on there. And it has a lid, so it's nice for it. And the square shape is just kind of cool. I use this a lot for like my stuffed shells and some of my like pasta dishes because it will help keep your food nice and warm afterwards. Like lasagna works well in this dish as well. It's just a nice way when you've got a big family and sometimes you got to share your oven space. This helps keep it nice and warm longer. Okay, let's get these. I'm making sure I peel off any of the little, you know how you get like a purple spot in your potato every now and then. Just get those off. And realize, get my potato skins in here. And I've already got like so much like stuff in my compost that I'm like, oh, I need some leaves to fall right now. I got to do some. We're about to clear out the butterfly garden because almost all of the flowers have like, you know, past their prime now. We've got a few stalks and the butterflies are still loving them. So we're going to keep those. But once, you know, get there, I'm like, I'm going to do a fall harvest in that garden box for it on there. So it's kind of getting there. The stalks, you know how sunflowers can get really tall and then towards the end they like start to fall over. Right now we've kind of got the leaning stalks of sunflowers. But Teddy is very much every day when he walks out to the bus, he's like, can I look at my butterfly garden? And we count how many butterflies we see. We also saw some hummingbirds on there, which is, you know, exciting. Whenever we go to my parents' house and we're swimming, my mom has like some hummingbird feeders, and we typically see like 4 or 5 hummingbirds there on there. And we're gonna cut our potatoes nice and thin.
Are those russets?
These are russets potatoes, which I think work really well for scalloped potatoes because they're nice and spongy and they really soak up your little, you know, milky, brothy base for it. You could use a mandolin. I'm just gonna thinly slice them here. Once I get to an edge like this, it's fine to just flip it over on that flat side. Gives you a nicer surface to work with. And then once we get these sliced up, I'll start to lay them because they do fan out more. And I find that if I pack my potatoes in too thick, like tightly, they take even longer to cook up. And I want these to cook up in about an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes, you know. I want them to be ready right at the end. So nice and thin because, again, thicker will take longer. And you wouldn't think that, you know, thinly sliced potatoes like this would take so long. But when they're cooking in that little milky, creamy, delicious bath, they do take a hot minute. These are one of those dishes growing up I absolutely loved, but it was never made fresh. Like, I just remember my parents buying like the box of scalloped potatoes. And I mean, I remember they were like one of my favorite dishes as a little kid, but I do remember them being in the box. And then I think you just like poured them out in the dish and then you covered them with either milk or something. But I remember them as a kid. They were so, so good. I haven't made these in a while simply because they are one of those longer dishes that takes to cook. But I think they lend themselves perfectly for our Sunday dinners because I typically try to make our Sunday dinners to be a little bit nicer, bigger one for it. And because my parents eat dinner with us on the Sunday dinners. we'll get these ones in there and then we'll see if I can squeeze the fourth one in or not. Get this one more. As you see, they spread out. And once you get these going, you'll need to get them covered in a liquid pretty soon because, you know, potatoes, they love to turn purple. I'll start getting these in here. Now, sometimes I do these in a pie dish where, you know, then you can kind of do them in a circle here. We're going to have to kind of do these in little rows. But they work well. I definitely think I'll be able to get another potato in here. Here we go. And again, try to make sure you fan them all out. They do like to stick to each other, but fanning them out will ensure that they all soak up that nice flavor evenly. And then I'm thinking I might do a cheesy topping on them, but I'll put them in towards the last of the baking so that it doesn't get overdone. But I do like a good cheesy scalloped potato. Here we go. Slide these in here. And let's get these. I think I'm going to put a little bit more in this row to bulk it up for it. And you kind of get it because you have those scalloped edges there. And we'll slide these guys again through it. But a little bit of potatoes can go a long way. They're nice and rich. You kind of cut them in squares. I don't, again, like to pack them so big because then it takes so much longer to cook. I actually think I might be fine with 3. And the fact that I like my sides. I like having a variety of sides, so I don't necessarily make huge amounts of them, but I like to have more variety. Because I'm like a meat and 3 type of girl. I like my 3 sides. There we go. And we'll tuck these ones in here. Try to make it as pretty as I can. And then we'll make our nice little creamy buttery broth here. And then I have 1 potato I think I'm going to slice up a little bit smaller because it was pretty thick. There we go. Make sure, I will say, sometimes I do this in a pie dish. I decided not to do it in a pie dish because sometimes it loves to boil over, and giving a nice little bit of room on there works. I'm going to slice this guy because he was pretty thick. Okay. Perfect. So we've got our base here. Let's get, I like to do a little bit of chicken broth with a splash of cream. That chicken gives a little bit nice flavor. The cream makes it extra rich. And then we'll put on some garlic salt. But then I'm going to do, when we come in later, I'm going to do a cheesy topping on it, which then we're going to throw in some green onions as well.
Grab Evie's sauce.
Oh, yes. Evie, so my stepdad gave Evie a big bundle of pipe cleaners, and she was going through and she made all of these really cool pipe cleaner flowers, which she just like at her mouth, she's like, I'm gonna do this. And they are just like so darling and cute. So of course we have to display it because they're just so precious. And I love it when the kids get like a creative idea on their own and really like make some fun stuff with it. It's very much how I was as a kid. I was very, very creative and maybe not always made a lot of messes, I was told. But I love it when they go out and they do stuff like that. Yes, I am. But I at least have learned to clean up after myself. I clean up after myself. Sometimes it takes me a while on there, but I remember I always did all the crazy stuff. School projects. What's the most elaborate thing I can do? I remember I think I was like 5th or 6th grade. We had to recreate like an animal cell. And I found some, concrete like that I could mix up, cement, and I did that. And I like put all sorts of things in it. Made it there. I think I did 1 year. I did a paper mache whale. And I like made a huge whale. Okay, we've got our chicken stock here. We're gonna pour it over, then we'll pour some cream over on there. I love, again, the chicken stock just gives it a really nice savory flavor to it, but you can also just use straight up milk in here. And then we'll throw in a splash of cream over the top for it. But you want to essentially kind of have them where it's just up to the top here. And then I'm going to mix my cream with a little bit of my chicken bouillon that's still sitting there. And then I'll see if I need to add any more. And then we'll add some pats of butter, not pots of butter. Mix this up. We'll pour this over because it makes it taste so delicious. And then I am going to do it kind of a slightly cheesier one, but I won't add my cheese until the very end because I've found that if you put your cheese on too soon, then it's more likely to burn because it stays in the oven so long. And I'm going to have it at varying temperatures. Potatoes are pretty, they can go with most like temperatures and things. So these can kind of bake up and down. I do have my lid that will kind of protect it for a little bit so that it can go towards the end. I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of garlic, salt, and black pepper over the top of these. And as I said, right now, my garlic salt is like all parsley at the top, which will add a nice pop of green. And then let's get our black pepper here. And then we'll let these start to kind of bake here. I am going to do it with my lid on to start off with. That will trap in that kind of heat and moisture, and then we can finish with the lid off. So it just allows them to get a little bit more tender and soft. We can pop these in my oven because I have enough room. I've kind of situated my racks so I can slide this on the bottom, and then we should have room later to move it up on the top when we do our cheese. But we should get it right down here. And that is looking pretty good. The chicken is looking beautiful in there. In a little bit, we'll cover and put the lid on our chicken.
What about the butter?
I have my butter sitting out right next to it. We do need the butter.
You could thank Susan for that.
Thank you, Susan. Haha, it's not hot yet. Need my butter. That's a very important thing. That would be very, very sad on there. Butter is very important.
What degrees and how long?
So right now my oven's at 450 because I'm baking the sourdough in there. Normally I would do these around between 300, 350 and 400. But potatoes are very resilient and I have a lid to go on. So with the lid going on them, I can make them go a little bit higher temperature. I will be turning my oven down to about like a 400 here, and so I'll have them at that. But they take about an hour to an hour and a half to cook up for this. And you'll know if you go to cut into them and they're still really firm for it. So there are certain foods that are much more resilient to temperature that can really handle it. And there are certain foods that are like you need to be precise. Potatoes are one of those that they can fluctuate and they tend to do pretty darn good at them. So thank you for reminding the butter because these are not diet potatoes. I mean, I don't think anybody eats a potato being like, I'm going to be really good on my diet today with them, but they sure are delicious. And this is for 9 people. So I think about it like a tablespoon of butter per person. Not so bad. Not so bad. Chicken's healthy. Slide that in there. We'll do this all over again. And back on there, lid on. We will take the lid off later and then let it steam out some more. But this will make sure those potatoes get nice and soft without overcooking them, the top of them. We can put this guy over here. Let's get our pie crust going so that can start to chill. Then we'll get our pears going for this. I'm actually going to make a triple batch of my pie crust so that I can make some homemade Pop-Tarts later this week. At least that's what I'm planning, but I will make something with them. I like to just make my pie crusts like if I'm going to make them, I'm going to do a big batch of them because a big batch is like the same amount of work as a small batch. So, and I will say I love butter crust on a pie. So I'm going to do a triple batch of my butter crust. So I'm going to do 6 3/4 cups of flour, and you want to use all purpose. So 1, and you make sure you have a big bowl. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 3/4. And then I'm going to use a tablespoon of salt because each batch uses 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, I will tell you this, I like to use Himalayan pink salt because that's kind of just my favorite salt. But be prepared that when you put it in your pie crust, it will give you pink and red little specks. That's just the kind of the minerals in there. But we need 1 tablespoon of our salt. We're going to give this a good mixture, and then we're going to cut 6 sticks of butter into it. We need 3 cups of butter for it. And this makes our pie crust just delicious. You know, I grew up making pie crust with shortening, and then I switched to butter pie crust a couple years ago, and just you can't beat butter pie crust. It works so well in both sweet and savory dishes on there. So we're going to make a big batch of it. We're going to cut our butter into it. Then we're going to mix our water. We'll get it press and fold, wrap it up. We'll chill it. And then we can start making our pear crisp. We're going to do a pear crisp pie, which honestly tastes very similar to an apple crisp pie. I started using pears like apples when in our old house we had 2 pear trees, and we'd harvest so many pears that I was like, what can I do? We can't eat this many pears. And I started making like pear galettes, pear crisp, pear, like apple pear pie. And honestly, they taste very similar. I will say pears give you slightly more of a florally fruity flavor, but it is just, they're delicious and them. And, you know, especially when you come kind of the fall, you get a lot of pear themed meals here. It's on there. So I love it. They're delicious. And I bought a pack of pears this week, and they normally with Costco, I'm like, oh, they won't ripen up for a while. They'll be good. They were like all ready to be ripened up for it. So it was like a 12 pack here. I'm using 7, and I have a few more in my fridge because I was like, oh, we're not going to go through that one. Normally, I can put a couple in the fridge and then I can ripen those up later. These ones were all ready. So we're going to cube our butter up. You could do this in a food processor too, but I find it's pretty easy just to, you know, do it with my little pastry cutter here. We'll kind of cut the butter into it, and then we're going to add in, it's going to be, since it's triple, 30 tablespoons of water, but that's the same as 450 milliliters.
And what type of pears are they? And do you ever make pear preserves?
So these are just your good old Bartlett pears, you know, on there. And, you know, I've made a pear butter before for it, but I typically, pear has a bit more of a kind of a grit to it. So I find I like it a little bit nicer just as in like substitutes in there. But, you know, I might have to try making a pair of things for it. I do have right now so many different, I've been making a lot of jams and jellies recently, or I should just say jams. I have in my fridge from the ones we've made in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've got a strawberry rhubarb. Yesterday we made a strawberry rhubarb nectarine jam, and then I have a strawberry fig preserve, and oh, they're so, so good. Teddy keeps asking me, can I have a jelly sandwich, Mom? And what I think he wants is he like loves to lick all the jelly off, and then he goes, I need more jelly. And I was like, I don't think you need more. You want more. I'm going to get these last 2 cut in here real quick. Then we'll go and grab our sourdough out of the oven. I open the oven a lot, so I'm just going to give my sourdough another minute or 2, simply because I was in and out several times. And every time you open up your oven door, you bring your temperature down about 10 degrees, and that can make a little bit of a difference. Sourdough bread is one of those ones that is a pretty hearty bread, so a couple extra minutes not going to make a big difference. I tend to bake my sourdough bread more of a blonde version where it's got a slightly lighter colored crust because I find that the next day the crust isn't as hard and crunchy. So let me get this one butter up so I can give my hands a rinse, and then we can go and cut this in there. But we'll get our sourdough out here, let it steam off on there, and that way then I can have my oven to kind of use for other things, different temperatures, get things cooking up. And we'll need to put our lid on our thing in just a second. Okay, move this over here. I'm gonna go give my hands a quick rinse because they're kind of buttery. And we can get our sourdough out. We'll get these things going, then we gotta make up the rest of dinner. I hear ya. Okay, let's get these guys on. Looking beautiful. So here is our gorgeous sourdough on here. In about 10 minutes, we are going to take the chicken and we'll bring the temperature. I will put a lid on it and bring it down, but we want it to crisp up just a little bit. So keep my things on here. When I make my sourdough bread, I like to take it out of our Dutch ovens pretty quickly because it continues to bake on the bottom, which can give you a really stiff, crunchy crust. But I like it. It's nice, kind of a light golden brown. And again, I do a nice kind of light blonde bake on it. And that gives you a chewy crust, but not a crunchy crust. If you like it even darker, just bake it an extra 10 minutes at that second stage. So instead of 20 minutes at 450, do 30 minutes. But again, I find it gets a little too hard and crunchy, especially little Teddy. He goes, it's too hard. And right now he has no front teeth. So a lot of things are very hard when he has no front teeth. Okay, let's get this butter cut into here. And pretty much by the time we're done with this, hopefully we'll be ready for our chicken. And then I can press and fold these. We'll let them chill. They don't need to chill. I only need one of them, but it only needs to chill for like 20 minutes before we roll it out. That way we can get our pears going, kind of stew them a little bit, and then we'll roll out our pie crust and we'll get that baking up. We're going to do a crisp topping on top, which is one of my favorites. I love, I mean, there's nothing wrong with like a double pie crust pie, but if you can get that crisp topping on the top, it just makes it more hearty. Okay, we're going to cut some of this butter out in here. And again, this is just 6 3/4 cups of flour with a tablespoon of salt. And that's really all the base that you put in it. Again, I make my butter pie crust so that it can go sweet or savory. That way, if I'm cooking up and I decided like, hey, I want to do chicken pot pies instead of a Pop-Tart, that might happen for it.
Do you have your sourdough recipe posted anywhere?
Yes, so I do have a sourdough recipe in my cookbook, which is available on our website and on Amazon, with the whole section on how you can start your own sourdough journey if you're interested in it. So like how to make your starter on there, the steps, because it's about a week before your starter is active and ready to use. And then I have like a video tutorial on how you can make your very first sourdough recipe, as well as a whole bunch of other different recipes in there. This is my big loaf because we're a big family, and I like to have a little bit extra left over, so I make my big loaf. That way we can maybe make a sandwich or whatnot with it tomorrow for it.
And what's your vegetable for the day?
Our vegetables, we are going to do garlic Parmesan Brussels sprouts. We've got scalloped potatoes and then caramelized carrots and onions. So we'll have a couple because, like you said, I'm kind of like a meat and three girl. I like my sides. The boys like their meat, but I like the sides on there. So we'll make those up as well. But we'll get our dessert going because I like to kind of do most of the time. I do like my baked goods during lunchtime because they're kind of going in the kids' lunches and their snacks for the week. But on Sunday, I do like to sometimes have a nice dessert for it to go with because kind of that's growing up. That was always how it was. We'd have dessert just on Sundays. And it was the day of the week we were allowed to have soda. Those things you remember so much as a kid. But Sunday was like, okay. My mom would buy like a 2-liter of soda for our family, which meant everybody got a glass, but it was a special thing back then. Here we go. And then I'm just cutting my butter until I have no chunks bigger than a pea for this. Then we'll do our press and folds. Now, again, this is doing a triple one because I want to make some extra. And if I'm going to go through the work to cut the butter into it, I might as well do it triple because it's not that much more work for it. And then we're going to get our pears sliced up. We'll season them with a little bit of, I've got some apple pie spice mixed up a little bit left and some cinnamon for it. And some brown sugar and vanilla. And a squeeze of lemon juice for that. We'll make our crisp topping and then we'll get our veggies going for it. Okay, we're just about here. And then you can see it just kind of breaks apart naturally and nicely. It's okay if you do end up having a few pieces bigger than a pea. It really doesn't make too much of a difference in there. It just will give you more of like a butter void or a pocket in there. But this is pretty good. Sometimes when I'm doing really big batches, I'll just go in there with my fingers the old-fashioned way where you kind of press it through for you to get rid of those big chunks. It works well.
What's the name of that tool you're using?
This is a pastry cutter, but it's like a 5-pronged pastry cutter, so it's a little bit different than the individual ones. But very, very helpful, especially like you can definitely get out a food processor and do it. I would have to do this several batches in my food processor, and it's just a lot of work. Okay, we've got this base here. We're pretty good. Again, I'm just going to do a couple, press through my fingers to get any of those really big chunks left out on here. It's just kind of a, you can also do this the whole time, but it takes a lot longer. It's fine when you have a few big chunks left, but it takes a lot longer. Okay, we've got this. Now we're going to add in our water, and I actually kind of pre-filled my water here. So with this, when you're making just a single batch, it's 10 tablespoons of cold water. 10 tablespoons, well, I did a triple batch, so I need 30. 10 tablespoons of water is 150 milliliters, so I needed 450. So I have it measured out. We're going to use a fork. We'll pour some, stir, pour some. This is going to give you kind of a dry, shaggy dough. Don't just pour it in one big puddle. Mix and pour, because as you're going to find towards the bottom, you'll have a nice little crumb here on there. And we don't want to have super wet spots. We want it to kind of mix in there as evenly as possible. And cold water, because you want this base to stay cold. And again, just toss it around here. I'm going to just mix it around a little bit more. And then we're going to just flip this out on the counter. We'll do our press and folds to bring it into an actual dough form shape. I'll divide it into 3 batches, and then we'll have it. I only need 1 batch today for it. This pie crust I use for, it's like my everything, my almond pastry, lemon tarts, pies, Pop-Tarts, so many different things for it. And it's pretty darn good. Now I'm going to move this over here because we need this whole little area here. And then we're going to flip it out because I've got my water done on here. And don't worry if you have a lot of dry shag. That will get incorporated. That's what's going to give you the flaky layer of your pie crust. And this is where you don't want to knead your pie crust. You want to do your press and folds, just like yesterday when I was making my homemade scones or when I make my biscuits. Press and fold. It's the key to the flaky layers. So press it all down like this. And then you're just going to kind of fold it over. In the beginning, you're just really picking up the crumbs and dumping them on top of each other. But after several rounds of press and folds, you'll actually get a dough that can fold over on top of each other. And then press it down. No kneading. Kneading gives you rock hard dough. This will give you those flaky layers that puff up in the oven when they bake. Here we go. And you can see this is a lot of pie dough. But this is a triple batch. And we don't need a triple batch today. But if I'm making it, I make it. Now this will last in the fridge for a couple of days. So it's not like I've got to make it up quickly. I can make this up in like 3 or 4 days and then we're still good. The trick is just to let it get a little bit cooler. Like take it out and let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes before you start working with it. Otherwise it's really firm.
What are you going to use it for?
I think I'm going to make some homemade Pop-Tarts. Not lemon tarts. My husband, typically when I make it, I either make almond pastry or lemon tarts with the pie dough. But I think we'll make some Pop-Tarts.
Can you freeze it?
You can freeze it on there. Again, you're going to have to let it defrost all the way for it on there. And you just got to make sure you don't have it exposed to any moisture.
And can you go over the ingredients one more time?
Yes. So in here, we did 6 1/4 cups of flour with 6 sticks of butter, so 3 cups of butter, tablespoon of salt, and then there is 30 tablespoons of water, which is the same as 450 milliliters. Okay, I'm going to divide this into thirds and we'll package it up. Let me grab a single blade pastry cutter. So you've got your multi-prong, which is for cutting up butter. This is for just like working with your pastry here. I'm going to press it down a little bit flatter here. And then we'll just chop it into hopefully fairly even sections on there. And you can see that you've got flaky layers going through this. And then we're going to wrap it up and we'll put it to chill in the fridge. I only need one section, so I'll put that one in right away and then I'll wrap up the other ones for another day. They may not look even right now, but when they're pressed out, they are even-ish. We don't need to grab a scale. They work just fine. Somebody doesn't want to have any pie tonight. Slide this guy over here. I'm going to put this one in the fridge to start chilling right away. And then that way it can get cold faster. Because it just needs to chill for a little bit. Because if you try to roll it out when it's room temperature like this, then it gets to be, I think. Also, see, this is thicker and this is not so thick, you know. You don't need to get the scale out. You just have to believe. Believe. There we go. Let's get one more. That's why my sourdoughs all turn up in different sizes, because I make big batches and then I divide them up and I don't get the scale out. It's too much work. I like my guesstimation. That is why we have a baker's dozen. You always get an extra one in case the baker's wrong. There we go. Get these chilling for a future deliciousness. And there. Okay. Now we're just going to this is also a great thing. So if you make sourdough or bread, and you ever have to like clean up your counter afterwards, use your pie scraper or your pastry scraper. It takes all of that little gunk off, which makes it so much easier. Okay, let's get these pears going. But you know what? Before we do that, let's go put the lid on our chicken. So we'll take our chicken out, we'll put our lid on, and then we'll pop it back in there for it. So let me grab, I got my big lid right here. It's a big lid. This in itself weighs a lot. I'm gonna grab this guy because this way you guys can truly see. It's a big pot. I'm gonna move my tomatoes over here just a little bit. Perfect. So here, I'll put my lid back up. We're getting our chicken. We've got it cooking right here. You can see we've got that kind of golden brownish crust going on it. Now, and you've got the waters boiling up before. Now we're going to put our lid on. And we'll pop it back in there. Lid will prevent the chicken from overcooking on the top, trapping in that moisture, making it really, really moist. This is also very, very heavy for it. And I'm going to see, I think this guy can go up top now. Perfect. I've got them all in there. I'm going to put, what's going to do about 30 minutes on here. Then I will take the potatoes and we'll put our cheesy layer on top for that. At least check on them and see how they're going for it. Okay, let's get our pears going for the inside of our pear crust. Then we can start on our veggies and our crisp popping and all that deliciousness. I am done with these guys, so I'm just going to clear these guys out of the way because we've still got a lot for us to do. Sunday dinner is our big feast meal, and kids are always like, "What? You're not making, lunch and breakfast and all those things?" And I said, "We've got all of our leftovers from the week. Make those up. I make one." On the weekends, I typically make one big meal on one day. So either it's a big brunch, and then we might be out and about doing something for the other ones, but I keep it simple. Okay, we've got our pears. Pears don't need to stew up quite as long, but I do like them to let out their juices just a little bit. Um, Pears do have a tender skin if you wanted to keep it. I do not like skins on my fruits when I put them, so I always peel them off. But if you want to save the work, you can keep it on there. The skin is tender enough for it. But again, it's not like apples you have to peel because that just doesn't break down nicely at all. These do get a little tender, but I again prefer without it. And then we'll just kind of peel out our little seeds here. And then we're going to stew them up. That way I can add just a little bit of cornstarch so it thickens up nicely so it's not a soggy, sometimes the fruit will sweat out too much juices and then your base is soggy and it doesn't work as well for your pie. On here, there we go. So we'll get these. And then I'm going to do almost like an apple pie spice to it. Now, I find that like around, Christmas, you throw in some more cloves or ginger, you can really get that Christmassy spice on it, which is really lovely with pears because again, they're similar to apples, but I feel like they do have more of a florally flavor to them. And then I'm going to slice them up a little bit more, but we're going to just start kind of this way first. Get them going. And we'll let them stew. I'm going to do brown sugar just because it pairs with the richness really well for it. And then we're going to make a lovely crisp topping, which we're going to use, oats, brown sugar, flour, melted butter, a little bit of baking powder and salt, and maybe a splash of cinnamon in there for it. Let's get these out. Now with pears, you want to make sure your pears aren't, I will say, pears go from being pretty firm to really soft. So you don't want them to be too soft or they won't hold their body on form for it, but they can still be like nice and juicy on there. Let's get these guys up and out. And then I'll get my first batch in here and then we can slice up. I'll cut one more up and then we can slice the rest up after we get the first batch stewing. Here we go. But again, we used to get our pear trees at our old house. And I think that's why all my kids really love pears because we had so much that we were eating pears all the time. And I would make pear galette, pear crisp, pear pie, pear applesauce, like essentially pears and applesauce together. We've made so many things with pears. But I think we would harvest like 200 pears at like one time. They'd all be ready. And the kids loved to pick them. They would go out there with buckets. It was just Torrin and Lena because they were the only ones who were with us at our old house. But they loved picking the pears from it. I always would see Lena out there in the pear tree when she was little. She would climb everything. And she'd be like, 10 feet up in that tree with searching for all the best pears.
Where did you learn how to cook?
I'm self-taught. So I actually started to cook family dinners when I was 13 years old. It was kind of a chore at our house. Each kid had one night a week where they would kind of cook. They would be the choice of the dinner. Um, and so I started when I was 13, and I slowly started taking over every single like night because I really enjoyed cooking. And honestly, the best part is you got to pick what was for dinner. And so having my control was the best, and it was the chore that paid the nicest growing up. And I just really, really loved cooking. I always was like fascinated in the kitchen a lot when I was a kid, always asking like, oh, or curious about that. And I just really enjoyed it. And I never stopped. In college, I had like a little toaster oven, hot plate, all the things you're not allowed to have in your dorm room. I had in my dorm room. And I really, really I would make some great dorm room food in there. I remember the RA would be like, it smells awfully good in here. And I was like, oh, it's nothing. But it was so yummy. Let's get these guys. I'm just going to do slice them up in here. We'll grab a little bit of brown sugar, a little pat of butter, which I find helps take away the chalkiness of some cornstarch later. The cornstarch will help thicken it up. So again, it's not too juicy because that can give you a soggy pie. And then we'll let this stew with a little bit of lemon juice and brown sugar, a splash of vanilla, which I think gives it a very mellow flavor. And then I'm going to use some apple pie spice and then some cinnamon. I have just a little bit of my apple pie spice left over from last year. that I made up, and I'm gonna make a new batch soon because it's almost Apple Fest time. We've got to pick our exact date. Apple Fest is coming up at an orchard that's not far from, let's say it's about 2 hours away from where we live, but we go and we pick lots of apples, enough to last us like 2 months. And they're so good. And the kids just really love it. And they have so many little fun things. So let's start getting these stewing. I'm going to put a little pat of butter in. Let's see. Let me grab this guy right over here. Just about a tablespoon. And then we're going to add in some of our spices. Let me grab my apple pie spice, my brown sugar, and a little splash of vanilla. Vanilla really mellows it out. So I told you I was pretty much almost out of my apple pie spice, but it looks like I've got about a teaspoon and a half. So I'm just going to use the rest in here. This is made with like cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg, ginger, a little bit of allspice, just like a nice mixture of it, but it has a strong cinnamon base to it. But really, really lovely. And then pears are a little bit sweeter than apples, so you don't need as much brown sugar. I'm going to use about a cup of brown sugar for this. Tart apples, I would use 3/4 of a cup just because they are a bit sweeter on here. And we're going to put in some fresh lemon juice. Just squeeze half a lemon in here, should be fine. And then I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of cinnamon extra. And a splash of vanilla. And then we'll start heating this up. About a half a teaspoon of vanilla. Put this on my back one. We'll give it a stir and we'll let those start to heat up. So give it a good toss. And then once everything's kind of stewed out, those pears have sweated out enough liquid, we'll throw in some cornstarch at the end. But we do want them to sweat out some of those juices now. That will just allow us to thicken up the base a little bit better, so that it isn't just like super soggy for it. I find it's just, with pears, they're already a softer fruit, so stewing isn't necessarily things, but you can make it too juicy.
Is your pear crisp on a cookbook?
You know what? Yeah, I don't think I have my pear crisp in there, but I will make my pear crisp in cookbook number 2 on there for it. And now this will be a pear pie crisp, which is kind of the same base thing, where if you wanted to just omit the pie crust on the bottom, it would be the same base for it. You just put that on there. But I love a little butter pie crust on there. It just gives you more deliciousness on there. And I really want to make Pop-Tarts this week. I feel like those are just a fun little back to school thing. It's growing up where, in the 90s and Pop-Tarts were a very real breakfast that so many, we had them, my friends had them. And now I look back and I was like, oh, all this food in the 90s we ate, there was like no nutrition, but they were delicious and fun colored. So we try to make it a little bit more healthy. I think I might use some of my jams. I think I might do a strawberry rhubarb Pop-Tarts with that kind of jam in there on top, and then just do like a nice little strawberry glaze on there. Or I actually have like a freeze-dried raspberry, which has a similar tartness to like a rhubarb, so I might do that as the glaze to give it a nice pink color. We'll see. We'll see what creative. A lot of times, so in the fall, I do these brown sugar Pop-Tarts, which are so good. So maybe I'll do that too, because that one's really good. Maybe we'll do both.
Did you finish the jams?
No, we did not finish the jams yet. I made a new batch yesterday. So we have, I've kind of jarred it up. And so I have a big new one. And that one was a really big batch. So I put it in 2 really big jars instead of my smaller ones. But it would have been about 5 jars of jams. But we ate a good portion of it yesterday. And Teddy had some today because we made a nice little jammy thing. We are almost out of our other ones. We have just a little bit. So my fig jam that we made, we are down to about half of a jar left of that out of the 2 jars we made. And then the strawberry rhubarb, the same thing, we're down to about half a jar. So they've been going, but I keep making some new batches on there. But we get them out and we kind of have them. Everybody has their favorites and that they use. Teddy is probably my jamalicious kid. He He really, really loves them. So even today, I started to make myself a slice of toast and I was putting jam on it, and he was like, "Ooh, that looks good." And I was like, "Would you like some?" And then he needed another scoop of jam on his because, it's not just a little bit. He loves it. I keep saying, was talking to my husband over a thing, and I said, "Oh, you know what? I should just make some really simple, small vanilla cookies, like a sugar cookie that he could dip in his jam for school." I'm like, he would love that as a little treat in his classroom, as like their little snack. And I was like, I might have to do that. And he was like, "Do it, Mama, do it, make it." And I was like, "You would love that, wouldn't you?" Just a dip, like a Dunkaroo back in the day, those little frosting treats we had. Okay, we've got our pears just about done here. We can let those stew. It's always, at least it's not as bad. Applesauce, I feel like I'm peeling apples for days because you've got to make a lot of apples for applesauce. So at least we're not doing that. Or even apple butter. I feel like you got to peel a lot because it reduces down so small, but so delicious.
So what type of lunchboxes do you use?
So I actually, for the kids, their lunch boxes, Teddy has a cute one from Pottery Barn, and then the girls both have some Stanley ones, and my son has a little Carhartt one that matches his backpack. It's like a bluish color. But I use just like the, little metal tins, the reusable ones that I can like wash, and they are all in there because I try to avoid plastic as much as possible on there. So they have that, and they just kind of, depending on what I pack, they get different sizes. I've got like a little 4 compartment ones, and then I've got circle ones, all sorts of different sizes. Sometimes I feel like I've got so many little containers, or as we were unloading from like Fridays, and my husband's like, "How are there this many containers from their lunch?" And I was like, "They all have a lot of little things. They like their little stuff." Got that going. Let's get our crumb topping made, our crisp topping. Then we can roll out our crust, and we'll get that. I need to melt a stick of butter so that, because it's a half a cup of butter to make our crumb topping. So let's get that melted, and then we can start prepping things. We can start prepping up our rest of our dinner here and get our pie crisp in the oven to bake, because it will need about 30 minutes to cook. And then we're kind of on the final stretch of making everything. Here we go. So we've got that melted. Let me grab a little bowl over here. We're going to use in here a half a cup of brown sugar. And we'll add in our flour last, but I like to do mix my other ingredients all together first for it, and then we'll do it. They're supposed to be nicely packed in. I'm just going to leave them overfilled because I don't want to get my hands all sugary again. So half a cup of brown sugar. This is their good old like Costco's organic brown sugar, which is kind of like in between a light and a dark, but it works. It's good. We need a half a cup of oats.
How many pounds of butter do you go through in a week?
A lot. I typically buy, I want to say, I buy around 8 pounds of butter a week. We don't go through all 8 pounds of butter unless I do something like crazy. But we do go through, I would say, 4 pounds of butter a week at least for 9 people. And so that's it. But that's because I use butter in all of my baked goods over like oil or shortening on here. And then we love bread. So we're going to have about a half a cup of oats. And we're going to add in, where's my little measuring spoon? A half a teaspoon of baking powder. This is going to give that crust on there, like this is my crisp topping crust, but it puffs it up nicely. Half a teaspoon. And we need a half a teaspoon of salt. And for your oats, you can use old fashioned or quick oats, just no steel cut, or those just are crunchy. I'm going to do a little bit of cinnamon in here, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. We'll give this a good mix. Once my butter is melted, we'll drizzle that over, mix everything up. Then we'll add in, it's a little bit more than 3/4 of a cup. It's like 3/4 of a cup plus like a tablespoon or two in here until we get the right crumb mixture. But let's start with this mixing up, and then we'll get our butter in here. I've got my base here starting to get nice and juicy. We're going to add our cornstarch here in just a second to let that thicken up. Let's get there. Let me grab my cornstarch out and we can get to rolling our pie crust out here in just a second. Cornstarch right here. And then we'll get our carrots and all of our good stuff going. I'm going to give my butter a quick swirl around because it sometimes melts faster, but I need it all melted for it. I'm going to actually turn off my heat and let the residual heat kind of move that. Okay, let's get on here. You see how our pears have sweated out a good amount of juice here? That's why I was saying I like to pre-cook them because then we can add stuff so that that juice doesn't make our pie crust soggy. I'm going to take my cornstarch here. And we'll start with about a tablespoon. Don't just plop your tablespoon on top of it. Give it a good shake around. Let it kind of fall like, snow is. And then we'll mix it in because if you leave it in a big plop, it's going to make like a cornstarch dumpling. And then we're going to mix it in. You're going to need, depending on how juicy your fruits are, some fruits need more cornstarch than others, but between 1 to 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Essentially, you want it to thicken up to where you can kind of right through it, but not so jelly that it's like super jelly. It still needs to have a little bit of run because it will heat up and cook. Before I add in my second one, I want this to heat up in a little bit of heat because the heat activates the cornstarch and causes it to gel up. Okay, our butter is fully melted now, so I'm going to pour this over my oats and my base here. We'll give this a good mix up.
Well, if you don't have cornstarch, can you use flour to thicken it up?
You can use flour. It just doesn't work as well for it. It can do it. I've just never been a big fan because it will make a thicker paste to it, but it doesn't make like the smooth gel that I find is a little bit more appetizing in there. And you gotta do it a slightly different way. If you're gonna do flour, instead of pre-cooking everything like that, you're actually gonna coat all of your fresh pears in the flour and the sugar mixture, and then you bake it up so it kind of absorbs that way versus here we're sweating it out and then doing it. So it's a slightly different method for it. I used to do it with flour, and then I switched over to cornstarch because I just think it's better. And then a little bit more, and then we should have our good little base here. I'll give it a good stir around here, and then let it heat up for it because, again, the heat activates the cornstarch and thickens it up. And you might keep adding and adding and then realize it actually finally warms up. You've added too much. So once you put in, mix it, let it sit for a second. But you can already see that I'm already able to kind of draw my spoon through this and it doesn't instantly flow back. So I think we're just about perfect here. I'm just going to turn off my heat and leave it kind of residual there. And then we're going to add in our flour to make our crumb topping. And then we can roll out our pie crust. We get that baking. Then we're going to make our caramelized carrots and onions and our garlic Parmesan Brussels sprouts. And then we'll finish up everything else here. So we need about 3/4 of a cup of flour going in. So we'll do a good little mix around. And then sometimes I typically add in 1 to 2 tablespoons more just to get to the right consistency, but it's really going to depend on how many oats you put in there. Sometimes you weigh your oats a little bit more or less, you scoop it up because they kind of just lay kind of fluffy in your cup here. So here, I always say this is too wet because you want it to kind of fluff apart. So I'm going to grab about a tablespoon or so more. Give it a good shake here. And then I'm just going to get in my hands with my fingers and work it through. And essentially you want a nice crumb topping. You see how this now falls apart? It's not holding together, but you can hold it, but then you can crumble it apart. That's about the right texture that you want for it. You might put just, again, a light sprinkle more. A little bit goes a long way. Perfect. And you don't want too much because you don't want it to be too crumbled. You want to be able to break it and fold it there. Okay, let's get our pie crust rolled out so we can bake up this pie, this apple pie crisp, and then we can get the rest of our little dinner base going here. So I've got this. I'm going to move this. You can see we've got this beautiful base here. So I'm going to move this off. That, even though I've turned it off, that direct heat will still kind of keep it going here. And then I'm gonna get my pie crust that we've had chilling. And you don't need it to chill super long, just enough to make it cold again, because a cold pie crust is gonna roll out better than a room temperature one. And then I need 2 pieces of parchment paper because we're gonna roll it between the 2 pieces of parchment paper, and then we will transfer it here. And that just makes it easier for the transfer process. But I know there are some expert pie crust rollers out who can do it. They roll it over like a stick and then they roll it. Yeah, not me. Let's get these guys. And this is going to be more pie crust than you need, I will say, for it. But I always just make extra because then I'll throw it in the fridge and keep it for it. Let me grab. You're going to want a hardy rolling pin. I have my good old-fashioned marble rolling pin, which I love. And it's because I grew up with marble rolling pins. My mom she had like 3 of them. My mom had so many rolling pins growing up. And every time it was like time for the Swedish gingerbread cookies, she would roll. Everybody would have a rolling pin and we'd be rolling out cookies all day. But it was so young. And then I always am like, my husband pointed out, you have a lot of rolling pins. And I was like, you're right, I do. I have several rolling pins and they all serve different purposes for it. You just collect them over time. I find it's easier when you've got a dough. If I can really get the heft behind it and the marble will press it, then I can roll it out faster. And then I have like a little fondant roller, little wooden rollers. I've got some ones that have some fun shapes on them, which I never can get to work. Okay, we're just about here. You want to roll out your thing bigger than your stuff so you have room for it to drop down. And that's why I like the parchment paper, because you can see where it is. And then I'll just take this so I have a nice, smooth, even one, because sometimes you push harder on other places and then not on place you need. We'll flip this up. And again, if your pie crust is cold, it will release off easily. If your pie crust is not cold, then that's where it starts to stick. And then we'll trim off everything in a little bit, but we'll pull these off right here. So get a little stickage, but not too much. So that's because it's got just a quick cooling. And then just lift up, slide it down in here. We will fill our pie first before we trim off our edges. Now you can do, the old fashioned like galette style pie, or you can do it on baking things where then you fill it and then you fold your pie crust over this way. I like to do the good old crimped edges, but I like to make sure it's all in here. Then we'll trim, and then you can save the other ones for little designs or whatnot for it. Let's get our pear filling here. We're gonna pour it back in here. Again, this is 7 pears, so good amount. If you want a full on big pie, 10 pears will do, but I find that this is kind of perfect for us, for our little family of 9 here. And get all that good stuff in here. And then we're going to do a crisp topping on it, which is why I have left rooms, because I don't want my crisp topping to go too crazy high.
So you say a little family?
Our little family of 9. Oh, it could be bigger. It's little for me, not really. I'm a family of 10, so growing up. So I have just 5 kids. So little compared to what I grew up in, but not for many people. Although we were out at some track race and Teddy was doing somersaults in the grass and he like somersaulted onto this one mom. And she's like, oh, don't worry, I have 6 of my own. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's another person who has as many kids as us practically. You don't see very often on there. And everyone's like, oh, it's a big family. And I was like, you guys have no idea what a big family growing up. Yeah. We were always the anomaly. There was very few people out there who had big families like us, but it was fun. I'm going to go around and we're going to just trim off and then I'll press my edges here. And then I will save this dough. Maybe I'll make a little, it's like you can roll out your extra dough and then make like little shapes, and you can put those shapes on top of your crisp and bake up if you want to do like you know, pumpkins, little leaves, and little apple dough.
We could probably make like 12 lemon tarts.
I could probably make a good amount of lemon tarts here. Not going to, but this is enough. I will say my single crust or my crust is enough for a double, like a lattice pie. So the crust base on the bottom and then the lattice on the top. So I have extra, but we'll save this because, again, that can make a Pop Tart or two. And then we're going to pop this. We're going to crimp the edges, which will give you your really pretty edges. And then we'll pop this in the oven to bake. And then we'll get the rest of our dinner going. And I was thinking about making, you know, before I decided to make all the jams with the rhubarb, I was like, oh, I could do a rhubarb crisp pie. But I was like, it's so good in the jams because it's like so, it's just a great thing to put with jams because jams are a lot of times can be really sweet, but rhubarb is nice and tart on there. Got our beautiful edges around our pear crisp pie. I'm gonna wash my hands and then we're gonna go place this in the oven to bake. And then I'm gonna bring, while this goes in, I'm gonna bring my temperature down.
Real quick, can you go over what's in it?
So we have our butter crust, which is made from flour, butter, salt, and water. And then we have our crumb topping on, which has oats, brown sugar, butter, flour, and a little bit of cinnamon and baking powder and salt. And then inside we have about 7 pears that we have sliced up, stewed with about a half cup of brown sugar, some apple pie spice, and a little splash of vanilla and lemon juice and butter for it. So it will have it will the scream and fall, which I feel like goes well with this dinner on there. I find, you know, pies are a great little Sunday dinner, you know, little treat. I don't make them often during the week, but they do make really good Sunday dinner times. Okay, I'm going to put my pie up top. I'm going to take these potatoes out and we'll check on them in just a second because my timer's about to go off and I'll see if they're ready for the cheese or not. But the pie I'm going to put up top because I like my pie to bake in that top. It's a bake things for it. Let's check our potatoes real quick. I think we're going to take the top off. We'll let them bake and then maybe get the cheese on them in a little bit. Look how gorgeous those are getting. So I'm going to take the lid off now and we'll do our final baking with this off. I'm going to turn my oven down just a little bit. Let me see if I can get that resting on top of that Dutch oven. It smells so good. We're going to put them on the bottom rack. And then my oven temperature, I'm going to move down to 425. And then I will put these on here. In about 15, I'm going to take this timer and 15 minutes. Let's clear it. I'm going to probably tint the crisp on there for it. And okay, I will move it. He doesn't have any faith that I'm going to keep it from falling. There we go. I need a bigger eye. You need to make me some more trivets. He's my woodworker. He needs to make me some more trivets. I'm just saying, you know what works is really great trivets? Wood cutting boards. I use them all the time as trivets over there because, you know, they're really hard to sanitize and keep clean. So they're for my breads and my stuff like that.
What temperature for the pie and how long to bake it?
So 425. I'm going to bake it for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to tint it and then bake it another 15 minutes. It needs about 30 minutes max for that butter crust to cook all the way through.
And what spices are on the potatoes?
The potatoes, they have a little bit of chicken bouillon in there, garlic, salt, black pepper, and a little bit, we're going to add some green onions and cheese to the top of them to make them like a cheesy scalloped potatoes. So, and cream and butter. So they're just really delightfully delicious. And let's get everything ready for the rest of our meal. Because we've got dessert coming down, let's get the rest of all the goodness going. We don't need this anymore. Okay. You know what? I forgot to go grab outside are my carrots. So let me go grab my carrots real quick on there and for it. So let me grab them because I definitely left them. Okay. We'll give them a quick wash, but I always got to forget something. Got my onion. It happens. Okay, we've got our carrots here. We're going to give a quick wash and then we'll rinse them here for this because we're going to slice them up and caramelize them here.
Yeah, were these flowers a school project?
No, so my stepdad gave Evie this really cute little so these set of pipe cleaners, and she just woke up this morning and decided she was going to create something with them, and she made these little bouquet of flowers, which are so darling. And then she made some little pumpkins and some other little flower things. So I was like, oh, this is so cute. I love it when she gets her little like craft mode in and she does all these little cute things because it's just so precious. And it just reminds me of how I was as a kid and always doing little arts and crafts on there. It was always what I asked for Christmas was art supplies. Okay, I'm gonna put some olive oil in here. We'll get our onions caramelizing up, and then we'll get our carrots peeled and ready to go in there to kind of do our little steam cook with, and then we'll add in towards the end some little brown sugar and some fresh thyme. And those will be for our caramelized carrots and onions. And then we'll get our stuff prepped up and ready for our garlic Parmesan Brussels sprouts. And then we'll check on our chicken here in just a little bit and see how everything going. It's one of those meals where it's like lots of different components, but so yummy. And it's nice thing because the chicken takes a long time to cook, but it's so wonderful. And then make all the other stuff in the middle. And then my parents will be over and we'll have our big family dinner. There we go. Just kind of how growing up, we always had big family dinners on Sundays. Here. Okay. We'll get our carrots, if I can speak here, caramelizing. Let me rinse my hands and grab some tongs real quick. And then get them tossed and going, and then we'll get our Brussels sprouts and bacon for it. Not Brussels sprouts and bacon, Brussels sprouts and garlic and Parmesan. No bacon today for the Brussels sprouts, so we're doing them a little bit differently. We'll see if my husband truly likes Brussels sprouts or if he only likes bacon. Okay, let's get these guys. We're going to give a quick peel on our carrots here. I may only need a few of these because I swear this is like a perfect snowman nose. He is a really big carrot. But we're going to give him a peel and then we'll slice him up into smaller pieces so that it can get nice and tender. We'll get but before we put our carrots in, we want to make sure that we have our onions caramelized. So those will take a little bit. Got that going. Let's get these guys. Now you could always use baby carrots, but with baby carrots, you're going to want to cut them in half or even quarter them because they're still a little too thick for these to get a nice like tender crisp on it. Okay. I think I might start with 3, and if I need my other ones, I'll throw them in there. But again, these are quite the size of these carrots. It's Costco carrots. I think we'll get by with 3 because again, we have so much. And that's kind of one of those things is I can make a lot of different sides, but I don't need to make as much of a side on there. So I'm going to cut these down, and then we'll cut these, and then we'll kind of slice. This one's going to go into thirds because he is quite large. And just a little bit smaller because I want them, to be small enough to where we can get them tender but still have great flavor on there. Now you could always probably cut them in the little carrot discs. Yeah. I only ever do my carrots in the little discs is when I'm making like the copper kettle carrots or the copper penny carrots. I don't remember the name of them, but they're slightly different.
Yeah, I don't like the discs. I like these.
I know, I do too. I don't know why. It's, the discs I think remind me too much of the frozen carrots that, peas and carrots that you had growing up, because that's what everybody had was frozen mixed vegetables. It was always, that would be like, there's the dinner and here's the bag of frozen mixed vegetable. And, ooh, we've got, and then they came out with the more like exotic mixed vegetables that were like broccoli and zucchini and cauliflower, or the Italian mixed vegetables. Always the worst was my mom would be like, you have to eat the lima beans too. And I was like, I don't want the lima beans. Nobody wants the lima beans. I was like, just get the carrots or the corn or the peas. They don't need to be mixed together. There we go. We'll get these. As you can see, they tend to, once you start chopping them down, you'll actually realize quite a lot of carrots can come out of these. And with our rule is, does everybody eat everything? No. We're a lot of different mouths with a lot of different opinions. And some are more picky than others, but I always make sure everybody takes at least one piece of everything. So like the carrots, they all have to at least try one carrot because you never know, you might wake up tomorrow and like carrots for it. But I always make sure that there is plenty of food on there that everyone does like, for it. So we always typically have, we have a bread or a grain. We've got the chicken, the scalloped potatoes. So there's always, unless you're my husband, then it's just tough cookies. There's just certain nights, salmon night. But he just typically doesn't love the meal. But we still eat salmon. Okay, I think that's actually a good amount of carrots. I might do one more carrot. We'll see. Let's get these tossed here. I'm trying to visually, I think I'm going to do one small carrot because, again, my parents are joining us and they like the veggies. And Teddy really, he is, I used to say Evie was my vegetable girl, but Evie is my salad girl. She loves all things that are like raw and in there. She loves, tomatoes, sweet peppers, lettuces. She loves those. But cooked vegetables, she does not like potatoes or corn. She does like, broccoli on there. But Teddy, he loves almost all vegetables that I give him. He really does. A lot of times I'll be sitting there and he'll be like, oh, can I have more zucchini or more of this? And I was like, oh, I just ate the last bit because I didn't think anybody else would want some. There we go. And he loves mushrooms and sauteed onions. But so does Torn. Torn really likes those as well. Okay, these aren't caramelized yet, so I'm not going to get to, not going to put my carrots in yet. Let's get a little bit of our garlic minced up because we're going to do our Brussels sprouts with our garlic, and I'll throw some in here as well.
Do you plant fall veggies?
I am doing a fall harvest right now. I'm actually about to start them inside. I have a couple starting outside, some kale that's outside, but I'm going to start them inside and transplant them because I'm hoping by then my sunflowers will be ready to come down and get on there for it. Oh, I want my garlic first for it. And then we have our garden out there. I have a couple things that we're planting. We're still harvesting. I'm waiting for like the tomatoes to come through and then I can do a nice fall harvest in my garden boxes for it. So I do have it. We have our pumpkins and our squash already going because they're in a different box. And I realized next year I should start and do maybe some watermelon or cantaloupe where I have my pumpkins growing and then switch because those are an earlier summer harvest because you have to start your pumpkins in like July for it. And so I was like, next year I'll be more on there. But we do have it right now. We found some rogue squash growing in our soccer goal area. It like sprouted up. And so I transplanted them and they look like they are just like the fun acorn squash. So I have one that might be ready to harvest in a couple weeks. So I thought that was pretty cool for it. We also found a couple rogue tomato plants. One was growing through our fence, and then the other one was growing through our little stick pile. And I transplanted those into a little pot, and they're doing well. But it's so funny how it's like just, the birds carry off a seed or a tomato, and then all of a sudden your plant grows without any help. And then if I'm trying to get it to grow, it's like, no. There we go. And then I think I might want to plant some mums because I love mums. And you typically plant them right around the end of August, and then they should be ready in the fall for it. So I think we'll get some of those because I love them, but they're always so expensive to buy. Okay, let's get this garlic up. I'm doing a good amount of garlic because I want the Brussels sprouts to really get that garlicky flavor. And we're gonna throw some in with our carrots as well. And I've got 3 pounds of garlic to go through. So, okay, we're getting some good caramelization here on the onions. I'm gonna turn this down right now to about a 4. And we're gonna throw in our garlic. We'll let that saute for about a minute, and then we're gonna get our carrots in there, and we'll put our lid on and do a nice little like steam saute. So let's get that garlic in here. A little bit in here with the carrots. And then I'm going to turn this burner on nice and low because we're going to just caramelize up the garlic over here, but nice and low. I don't want it to crisp up or anything like that. That's going to be for our Brussels sprouts. Now I've got very garlicky hands, so let me give this a quick rinse. And let's get our Brussels sprouts kind of going so that we can have them prepped up. In about a minute, we can drop our carrots in. But we wanted those onions to get a little bit of that caramelization, some of that brown color on them, because once you start adding in some other vegetables, they're not going to caramelize as much. And that's where you're going to get your natural sweetness out, and it just makes them so lovely. Okay, let's add our carrots in, and then we'll put our lid on to steam cook the carrots a little bit. And then towards the end, we add in like a little pat of butter with some brown sugar and garlic salt, and then some fresh thyme, and they're just so lovely. Let's give them a quick toss. There we go. And then we got to also grate up some cheese to go on our scalloped potatoes because I think a cheesy scalloped potato sounds yummy. I always say the kids, I never really meal plan. I always do take in the kids' suggestions when they say, oh, hey, I want something like this or that. But sometimes I'm like, what do I want to eat? That's the beauty about being the chef. You get to decide. Let's give this a quick little stir here. Have those going. And let's get our Brussels sprouts. For our Brussels sprouts, you want to take off the little bottom, and then I just quarter them. That way, you'll get that raw part in the middle will get sauteed up nicely, and you won't have that bitter flavor because Brussels sprouts, a lot of people just steam them, and I'm like, that's the worst. They're so bitter. This one makes them all nice and tender and gives them great flavor.
Any mushrooms today?
No mushrooms today. On there, I had mushrooms, and I was thinking, I almost did like a mashed potatoes with like a gravy, but I was like, changing it up a little bit. We'll save my mushrooms for another dish this week. I did get my butcher box in, so I have some, and I typically love to do pork chops with a mushroom gravy because I just really love pork chops that way. But who knows? I might change it up. I might do. I have to say I'm in my soup season already, even though it's not really soup weather, but I've converted already. Creamy mushroom soup. So yummy. Okay, let's go check on our oven. We've got our, I'm going to bring my aluminum foil here because we're going to tent the pie because we have it going there. And if you leave it too long, especially at a high temperature, it can overcook. So beautiful here. You can see how flaky those edges are, and they just look fabulous. It's just popping up and so flaky, but you see how it's getting darker. So just take your aluminum foil here. Loki, you don't need to bark at everybody. Okay. And then about 15 more minutes. Loki. I know. He's a fierce dog. Loki. Come here, boy. Such a fierce dog. He lets us know when everyone's coming, though. He is not a guard dog in anything. I think my husband and I like to scare each other, like pop around the corners. My kids do it to me too all the time. I would say my kids do it to me more. We like to just jump around the corners. And Loki on the other day, and it was that, but like my husband was waiting behind the corner to pop out and scare me. And I like got scared. Loki like ran behind me and was like, and I'm like, where's my fierce guard dog protecting me? He's like, no, I'm going, not me. Loki, I think he would if somebody was going, he would just look up and he would be like, oh, are you going to give me food? Are you going to give me pettings on there? But he does like to bark at everybody who walks by our house. He acts like he's fierce. Every little thing. And, I feel like we live in a neighborhood with a lot of walkers. There are lots of walkers out there. Lots of dogs. Loki likes to be. He's like, "Ah, that's my mailbox." Okay, let's get these guys and we can get them in with our garlic that we just have barely. I have it nice and low because, again, garlic is a very sensitive spice. You cook it too high and it will go from being nice and crispy to burnt in no time. So a little bit low, let it infuse in the oil. Then we'll get our Brussels sprouts here crisping up in that. And then we'll add some Parmesan cheese at the end. Once I get these guys prepped up and ready to go in, we're going to grate up our cheese to put on top of our scalloped potatoes so we can have this nice cheesy top on there, and then throw in some green onions, which I think will make it really, really lovely. But I always like to add that cheese later because if you put it on too soon, you risk burning your cheese, especially because the cheese will melt up a lot faster. So I put it on after I've cooked up. It allows the potatoes to cook up a little bit faster too. A lot of times when I like to do like theme meals, especially for like St. Patrick's Day. A lot of times at St. Patrick's Day, I'll do a scalloped potatoes, but then I use the Dubliner cheese on there, which is the nice, lovely Irish cheese, and so yummy. Okay, a few more of our Brussels sprouts on here. Again, quartering them just allows them to cook the inside better, so you don't have that firm tough. It gets rid of that bitter flavor that when you get an undercooked, Brussels sprout it has, and just makes them more lovely. A little bit more flavor, crisp them up on there. It's not as bad as shredding it. I remember my sister once asked me to help her make a Brussels sprout dish, and she's like, "You need to peel off every leaf," and I was like, "What?" And it was for 40 people because it was for Thanksgiving, and so I was sitting there peeling off every leaf, and I was like, "Never again am I helping you with the Brussels sprout dish." Quartering it is about as good as I go. If they're really big, I might cut them in again. Let's bring them in here with our garlic. We'll let them kind of saute. We'll add a little bit of garlic salt in a little bit, but we'll let them kind of cook up first. We'll toss this around. Beautiful. And then I'm going to go grab my little just some cheese out of the refrigerator so we can shred up and add on top of our potatoes for that. We'll grab those out here. So, and then we'll be because the cheese will melt up, we're about ready. We're going to take our chicken out here in just a second because it's been in it for a good amount of time here. Okay, I got some sharp cheddar cheese. Let me grab my cheese grater. We'll grate this up, then we'll take our potatoes out, and then we can coat it on top, and then we'll finish it there. Where did I put it? Right here. On there. Okay. For it, look at your cheese packs. Patience. I have to unwrap it first. Oh, he's so greedy, greedy, greedy. Taxes first. It's like Robin Hood over here. Here, look at this. I never use this, but look at that. It's always on the side. I never use that one, and I never use the little one. It's funny how you have them, but you never really use them. Well, thank you, DMAC. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to use, I think, about 1 to 2 cups of cheese. I'm going to grate off a good portion here. I love people say like, "Oh, you can do it like this." I'm just always held my box grater up like this. And I've always done it with like either a bowl or a plate underneath. And that's just what I'm used to.
That's the way you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like the other way, it's not a natural movement.
Not everyone's trying to come up with these.
This is how you fry bacon, and it's like in a pan. And I was like, I have been frying my bacon in a pan my entire life. I always thought it was strange when people started putting it in the oven, and I was like, I guess you could do it in the oven. But to me, bacon was fried in a pan. Here we go. I think this should be good, but we'll see on here. Okay, let's go grab those potatoes out of the oven. We'll bring them over here. Then we can kind of cheese them up. I'll cut a little bit of green onion over them. And we'll kind of see how everything's going here. Beautiful. You see how I've got the steam? I made sure not to lean into that one. Perfect. And you can see that almost all of the moisture of that milk is kind of cooked around for the edges. So beautiful. I'm gonna slide this right here. And this will give us our cheesy, delicious top on here. So our base in here are our potatoes with some cream and some chicken bouillon, butter, garlic, salt. Now we're gonna take our shredded cheddar cheese, and oh, we shred it because if you get pre-shredded, it has like an anti-caking agent on it and it just doesn't melt as nicely. We'll sprinkle that over the top. You know, you don't have to have as like a thick layer. You know, you don't need it like a lasagna layer on top, but a good base up here on there. And then I'm just gonna get some green onions that I have over here. And let me just snip the tops off. And we can get these on here. And that will add a little bit of fresh onion flavor too, melted into the cheese. And then we'll pop this in there, and pretty much when everything else is ready, we should be able to pull it out. We're gonna check on our chicken there because I think we're about ready to pull our chicken out too. Okay, beautiful. Let's go slide this in here, back in there. You can already see the residual heat is already starting to melt up that deliciousness. Now I always say scalloped potatoes do make for a messy dish on the side, but let it soak and then it cleans up pretty nicely. Okay, let's slide that back here. Pull that one right over, looking good. Let's check on our chicken here. I'm gonna grab that out. Oh, these are just about perfect. I'm gonna put this lid over here and then we'll grab the chicken out.
For the carrots, is all you added so far is the
Onions, garlic, and the carrots. We're gonna give them a toss. Towards the end, I add in butter and some brown sugar, but I don't like to add that until the very end here. Okay. Beautiful. So I always like to let our last bit of this kind of sit on here. I'm gonna put the lid on in just a second, but I want you guys to see how beautiful and delicious it looks here. We've got our chicken roasted up. You can see like the juices are boiling here. Again, we did that butter. You can see the herbs on that. The skin is pulled back a little bit. That's not a big thing. But on the top, we did the oil rub with the dry herbs, which gives you that crispier top on there, which makes it lovely and delicious. Okay, I'm going to put our lid on it to just trap in that moisture here for a good things. When you take your chicken, just like with turkey or anything else, let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes before you cut into it to really set up to 30 minutes. This pot is going to stay hot for a very long time. I'm going to move this guy right over here because he's so heavy. And that way I can get working on these for it. And then we'll be able to serve up our dinner in just a little bit. Let's get these guys a nice toss here for this. So this is our caramelized carrots and onions. We have the lid on there steaming, as you can see. That traps in that moisture. You guys are just getting steamed out here. Let me see if I can get the steam away. Beautiful. I let them with the lid on. It helps the carrots get tender. Then we'll finish off. And when we make our little caramel sauce, then we'll put it back on there. Let's get these Brussels sprouts in our garlic kind of things. I'm going to add a little bit of butter in here. We start off with oil, but they're going to taste better with some butter. And everything tastes better with butter on there. And then I'm going to, so about a tablespoon in here. Let's get our Parmesan cheese for it. We're going to let them cook and we'll coat them with it, but I'm going to grab that out first. Loki, stay away from the cat. Where is my Parmesan? Huh. I have it. Well, looks like my kids, I don't think they put it somewhere, but they totally, there's the cat and the dog. They're found my Parmesan. They are definitely, Loki is trying really, really hard. Loki, come here. He really, really wants the cat. Really, really hard. You was, I know. You being a good boy. I try. I try to be a good boy. He tries. Okay, let me get our thyme here. I saved a little bit of thyme for our carrots. There's the rest of it. Let me clean up some of our scraps. Look at this. I've already got like a whole bucket full almost for our compost. I decided instead of getting a bigger bucket, a little one, because I can take it out every day. Jackie really likes to help me. He loves to help me in the garden. Bless his heart. He's not very helpful, but he loves to help me, and I cherish his help. One day he'll be helpful. Right now, he's very much, Jackie, do it. Jackie, do it itself. And I was like, but Jackie, you don't know how to do it yourself yet. But he still is going to do it. Here, you see, this is what I love. You crisp it up. That's why we quarter it. You get that crispy edge on all sides. Just so much great flavor for it on there. Okay, let's get our, I'm just going to clear a little bit around because we're about to get our pie out of here in just a second for it. And I've got quite the mess on here. I just want to clear up. That way we have the spaces to put things. And then we'll finish up. We'll season everything. We'll get our brown sugar in with our things, make our glaze, and we'll have our feast, none the least. So much. That's always sit there as growing up, you know, Sunday dinners. We always had our big family kind of big feast meal where, you know, we'd all sit down at the nice table with nicely set on there. And in my mind, I have like, I'll have perfect fall china. It'll be perfect on there. And then reality goes to eat, and everybody's like, oh, can I sit at the island, Mom? Can I do this? And I was like, don't we want to sit at our dining room table? And they're like, do we have to? And I was like, yes, we do. My mom always goes, I so appreciate it when you eat at the dining room table with us. Loki's going back over to the cat. Oh, Loki, leave the kitty cat alone. On there. Loki's a sweet one. Whenever I always say his cousin, my mom's dog, we'll just call it cousin. Whenever his dog cousin comes over, she is very naughty with the dog or with the cats. She likes to chase them. And my parents are like, oh, not my sweet dog. And I was like, yes, your sweet dog. She could never do anything wrong.
How old is Loki?
He is 5 years old. He was born on tax day, April 15th, right before Teddy was born. I don't know what convinced me to get a dog with a newborn baby, but we got him 8 weeks later. Teddy was born on May 7th. So you can see I think Teddy was very, very, very young when we got him. So they're like thick as thieves, those two. Put our fresh thyme in here. We'll put a tablespoon of our butter in here, maybe a little bit more because we want it to caramelize up nicely. And then we're going to get our brown sugar in here. We've got about a minute out before we grab our pie out of the oven on there. With the brown sugar, you can also do honey. They both give you that nice little sweetness. I'm just going to do about 1/4 of a cup lightly packed for it. Brown sugar tends to be our favorite with it on there. You don't need a whole lot. I don't want them to be candied carrots, but really to enhance the caramelization flavor of the natural onions. So give it a stir, and then you just let it melt with that butter, and then we'll throw in a little bit of garlic salt so it's that sweet and savory, and it just makes them so yummy. Here we go. And just keep your temperature down low because you want it to melt, but you don't want it to turn into candy yet. Let's get these. Beautiful. You can see that the Brussels sprouts are going quite nicely. You've gotten some nice crispy edges on them, and they're starting to get that vibrant green. Okay, let's go grab our pie out of the oven. Our potatoes might be ready as well. We can check on both of them. I'm quickly running out of space. There's my little lobster claws. You should see my smorgasbord days. Oh, I run out of space there. That's a lot of cooking. Oh, you know what? They're all perfect. I'm going to grab my potatoes first. We can see we've got this beautiful, bubbly, cheesy edge here for our scalloped potatoes. And I did them nice and thin. That way you could make them thicker. They cook longer, but we just needed to feed our 9 people. We'll take ours off. Slide this right over here. And we've got our beautiful Pear crisp pie. And just look at the flaky layers of that crust there. That's what's so delicious about this. I'll hold it up because I don't know if you'll be able to get it, but you can just see the flaky layers of that crust here. How gorgeous that is. Especially this guy right here. It's like 5 layers of flakiness. So yummy. And that's just from the press and folds. And then I'm going to slide this over because this is hot underneath. And we've got our beautiful pear crisp pie here. So we've got our butter crust base underneath. Then we sliced up 7 pears, seasoned with brown sugar, a little bit of homemade apple pie spice, cinnamon, vanilla, lemon juice, and made a lovely sauce and then did a crisp topping on it. Okay, let's get these last things seasoned up. We will get our chicken out and ready to work with, and we will be ready to kind of serve up here. Although I will keep it kind of buffet style for right now because we'll serve up when my parents get here on there. That way everything stays nice and hot. Okay, let's get a little bit of garlic salt in here. You can see our carrots are nice and kind of a tender bit. And then we're going to do garlic salt in our Brussels sprouts as well. And then we're going to give them a stir. And we're going to give them a nice coating of Parmesan cheese here. And this is our cheesy scalloped potatoes. So we kind of cooked our potatoes for about an hour and a half with a cream and chicken broth bath with butter in there. And then we topped them with some cheddar cheese about 10 minutes ago for it. Beautiful. Okay, let me get our Parmesan cheese going over the top of this, and then we can get our chicken and we will have our meal ready. And see, this is the benefits of my parents just living down the road. When they're always like, just text me when dinner's ready, and then they head right over. I have enough time to get everything set and perfect. Okay, we're going to turn this off, and we're going to do a nice grating. And you're going to want to do a good thick coat because you want it to melt over the Brussels sprouts and add that great little cheesy flavor with it. And then we have that garlic in there and the Parmesan together. Just is a really great way to do the Brussels sprouts that are a little bit different. A lot of times I do that bacon Brussels sprouts, but so good. And quarter your Brussels sprouts. That's the biggest hint. Don't just leave them whole or in half. Okay. Little bit over here. Perfect. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring this guy, I'm going to slide this over here. I'm going to rotate it. We'll take our lid off, and then we can do our walkthrough of everything. Let me make sure all of my stove is off and ready. Okay. Now, this guy stays nice and hot, so remember, look at that. Okay, so good. Let me put this right over here, and then we can do our walkthrough. Okay. For dinner tonight, we have our oven roast chicken where we made a great, beautiful herby base with fresh oregano, rosemary, basil, thyme, and we stuffed that underneath the chicken skin. You can see it right there with some green onions and butter, and then we seasoned up. We baked up a loaf of our homemade sourdough bread. This is my big loaf, gorgeous, beautiful. Then we have our Brussels sprouts with garlic and Parmesan, so fresh garlic, Parmesan, sautéed in the pan with a little bit of garlic salt. We've got our caramelized onions and carrots here with a slightly sweetened sauce. We added in a little bit of butter and brown sugar and garlic salt and fresh thyme for it. And then we have our savory scalloped potatoes with a lovely cheddar cheese topping and green onions. They were cooked in a broth with cream and butter and just so delicious. And then for dessert, we have our pear crisp pie. We have our beautiful butter crust, which is so flaky and delicious. And we made a nice sweet pear filling using fresh Bartlett pears, brown sugar, spices, and a crisp topping. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do have our website, which is available in our profile page. But on our website, we have our Amazon storefront that has all of my different cooking gear and gadgets in it. So if you're interested in what we use, like our HexClad, All-Clads, our Dutch ovens, I have it all in there for you to check out. We also have a link on our website, and this is available on Amazon, our cookbook. In my cookbook, I have my roast chicken recipe, my sourdough recipe in there, as well as a whole tutorial on it. Our newest cookbook, we're going to actually be putting in some new recipes. Some of actually almost all of these are going to be in our new one as well. But again, guys, thank you